This is the 22nd of March, 8 a.m. So the session is starting to talk about package specialization as a subgroup for Nephew, right? So let me share my screen. So what I thought because we somehow need to get, I don't know whether you saw John has sent out a kind of a release planning and it's rather aggressive. So
come on.
Okay.
No, that's
No,
good.
it's very
John, it's good to expect that it is aggressive, right? That way we can make adjustments.
Yeah, no, it's very aggressive.
It's aggressive, but it's not bad either, because at least you now have a bit of a milestone and a target, right?
That's the idea.
Yeah, so I thought, because we have to get some action going. So I thought for today, what we would do is I prepared okay, so this is a proposal. So the idea is to go through it with you guys and then discuss it and see what it does. But what I tried to do in the slide deck, so it was basically a follow-up of what we discussed on Monday, go through the things. So what I try to do is represent a package, what we get from the management. So this is basically an instance for a specific cluster that is coming. So there's a package revision that has been added. So there has been changes made to it, and then it comes to us. So then now we have to do a bunch of work, right? So what I try to represent is go through each of these things. And by the way, some of these things are happening in parallel, but try to give a bit of a sense of what has to happen and what's each of the components that we all to deliver need to do somehow. So that's basically what I prepared. Is that okay for you guys to?
Yeah, we'll assign all these things to ONAP meeting 6. I don't know who that is. So.
Oh, apologies. That's me, Liam Fallon. Let me just log out and log in, because I have to run an ONAP meeting exactly before this. I just forgot to log out. Just a minute.
I'll wait. So, and probably the package is not complete, but I just try to give you the most or the components that I believe are relevant for us, right? So what is in there? So there's a kept file, and that kept file has more to it, but what you see is, and also this pipeline is not complete. So this kept file contains, when we get it, it contains a pipeline with function. So this represents a function. So, and I give them names already. We can discuss the names, not a problem. And then there's also some conditions that are set when it comes to us, most likely, right? So that's basically what I try to do. I propose to put 2 conditions here. Okay, so there is some chat. So, okay, hey, Leon. Yeah. So I try to say that there is 2 conditions, but I will see how that works, right? So that's the kept file. Then there is a package variant set, which was used during, which came from package management, but we don't care about it. Maybe there's also package variant probably here, but so we don't care about this. Then what it matters to us is there is a cluster. So there is cluster info available that we will need, and you will see that in the NED. What we need is the CNI type. So we need to resolve that. Then there is, and I just put here, and this is just because I didn't have too much space. So there is 2 network attachments. So 2 interfaces that I put, but in reality there will be more, right? But I didn't have too much space on my slide, so I basically picked just 2 for now. Yeah, and maybe, yeah, that's maybe not for now, but I think because there is so much confusion on network attachment, and this is wrongly spelled, that maybe I was proposing to change this to interface or something like that. So, but let's discuss that afterwards. Then there is capacity and there is DNN, because this is an example for a UPF, basically. Okay, so that's what the first thing that we get to us. And so what I'm proposing is the first thing that we, the first function that we have to build is a kept function. And what it does, or what it's supposed to do, is it looks at all these resources, but in particularly is interested in cluster info. He is interested in network attachment, and he's interested in DNN as well. And what he does, so as long, one thing that we have to be aware about is that these are kept functions. So this basically they can actually be executed already during the package management. So in other words, so this cluster info or this cluster context will only be injected during package variant when the cloning happens, and when that injector function that I think John talked about yesterday is actually going to kick in. So that means, so when we build this function, we have to be mindful that when it's in the package, it can run and not everything is there, right? So for example, this function will probably run already before, but because there is no cluster info, it shouldn't do anything. So we have to build it in such a way that so that's what I call robustness or idempotency that we discussed, is that we have to build in the measures to do this in a way that that is then idempotent, but actually is also what I sometimes call robust, in the sense that you don't run this and then crash or something like that. So we have to build some capabilities in there to take care of that. So, and it's only when the cluster info is available that you look at, so then what is happening is per network attachment that you see into the package, what you're doing, what we have to do is generate a VLAN allocation CR if required. So there is, if you look at the CR specs, if you look to the interface, and that's what I talked about, is like we have these VNIC interfaces and we have these loopbacks, right? So in the case of a loopback, you don't need to allocate a VLAN, right? So you will see that based on the type in the CR, we will know whether it's whether we need that VLAN or not. So there will be an indication in that network attachment CR to basically say whether or not you need to do a VLAN. And then so what you have to do is generate that VLAN allocation CR, and then also on top of that, set that condition with a specific type that is related to the VLAN allocation, and you set it to false. So you'll see in a bit how that would look like, or conceptually look like. Second, besides the VLAN allocation CR, we also have to generate the IP allocation CR, and again, same thing, set condition to false. And then what we also have to do, so the this IP allocation, there will be one. So if that network attachment for a VNet or for a loopback, we will have to create an IP allocation of that particular type. But also for the DNN CR that contains the pools for the UEs, right? So that also for this, we need to generate an IP allocation of type pool with a certain prefix size, right? And so it's not only for the network attachment, so that's actually a wrong thing. And then per DNN pool, we need to generate, I created this morning, so an allocation CR plus set condition type / false. And then also when this is a VNet, we also have to generate an NAD. Right, so an NAD condition, not a CR yet, but we have to say someone needs to generate an NAD going forward. So this is the Multus network attachment definition. But in this case, we just have to put a condition, not yet create the CR, right? And if that is done, that package will look like this. So we'll have a VLAN allocations, for each of the interface. Actually, I see already a mistake. So we need an IP allocation for the DNN. And so you see here that these conditions are being added with their respective status. Yeah, Vish, go ahead.
So the pipeline that you're talking about, the generator, the NAT generator, and deployment generator.
So these are the functions. So when I talk about the network attachment generator, it's the function that is being executed as part of the kept pipeline. So in the kept
file,
pipeline,
yeah,
there is a pipeline, and in that pipeline, this function will be referenced. And so when Porch basically executes the pipeline, this function will be run. That's what I'm meaning.
Okay, so it's basically at this point of time, I am aware that there's a mutator and a validator. This falls under the mutator, right?
Yeah. So in other words, so that's a good point. Is so far, if you look at all the documentation of all the kept functions, they talk about mutator and validator.
Yes.
Here we are actually doing a generator. So it's like a special. It's basically something new, but it also is supported into the system.
It is available, you're saying? It's already available in a newer version of kept?
No, but
No,
we will use the mutator function. So we will add
Okay.
that as a mutator function, but they will be generators.
Okay. Now, the reason I'm asking this is for the benefit of others also who are not familiar with kept yet. So that way they understand when they say pipeline, they're talking about the pipeline in context of kept.
Oh, very good. Yeah. So yeah, for everyone, if there is unclarity or things unclear, please ask questions. So that's the purpose of this, plus to discuss what needs to happen somehow, right?
Okay. And the kept functions that are out there already that has been implemented, are we trying to add additional functions? I mean, I see a functional catalog with a whole bunch of, it says curated function catalog.
Yeah.
Are we trying to actually enhance that?
So I think that we'll be building some Nephew specific functions, but the idea would be that they're not package specific. So when we write this NAD function, we can use it. Any package that needs NADs can use this, right? So it's not likely that we would put it into the kept function catalog because it's pretty Nephew specific, or at least our use case specific. It'll likely depend on Nephew defined CRs, like the cluster context, things like that. But it will, we do want to avoid building in general. We will probably have to do it in building functions specifically for packages. And when we do, likely they would be ones that live in the package. So there's like a Starlark runner, which lets you write. Starlark is basically a subset of Python. It kind of sucks, but we can also create a function like that runs, from other languages, so those you can create sort of package specific functions if you need to, but they should live in the package. And then you can have package or really resource oriented functions, which is really the goal, that live in a common catalog that can be used across many packages.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this one would be a Nephew specific function. Yeah. This would be a Nephew specific function. But and what you see here is that this function will be the same for SMF and AMF and anything that needs an interface as a network function or even other things. That would be the same thing. So this would be usable for anything that needs to have an interface somehow plugged to it. That's the idea. Yeah. Akash.
Yeah. So I have this question where I understand these are functions which we are going to be defining it in a kept file.
Yeah.
Am I audible? Yeah. So, but I'm trying to understand how much of it the package creator need to understand and define it in his catalog, that the functions which need to be used in this. So does that come from there? Like in the catalog, when he's creating the packages, where he says like, okay, this package will require all these functions in this kept file, and when we clone it, all of that come together, basically, like, so that is somewhat decided by the package creator that these are the kept functions you want to use. Am I right in my understanding?
Yes, now I see. If you look to this function, right? We haven't really thought that through. I believe.
Hello?
Yeah. Do you hear me?
Sorry, am I audible?
I hear you.
We hear you. Yeah. The short answer to your question is yes. It's the package author who puts the initial list of functions in and knows what resources they have, and we can build tooling that's that helps them with that. But nonetheless, yeah, they have to know what functions are. But I think Wim was going to explain in more detail.
Yeah. So I was saying now, if we build those functions right, and of course in Nefio we could basically add them irrespective of whether you need them, because if they are built right, they shouldn't do any harm if they don't need to be executed. So let's take an example that what I was trying to say is that, okay, this network attachment generator, if you will, if you have a package that doesn't contain anything, it shouldn't do anything. You see what I'm saying? So
yeah, that's a good point. That's an interesting way to think about it. We could just have a set of functions we always run.
Yeah, so I'm not saying that that's what we should do, but we depending on the smartness, but yeah, we have to build them in such a way that they are very robust, and then ideally we put the right function in the right package. But okay, that we have to still figure something out on how to do all of that stuff. But yeah, but we can also basically take an approach to say, okay, here are all the Nefio functions. We always contain them, and then if they are built in the right way, then they don't do any harm. That's also fine. I'm not saying that that's the right thing to do, but that could be an approach. Okay. Now, in terms of robustness, so one of the things that you can also see is that sometimes you can have a failure or something like that. So, and that you can have new input. So even so one of the robustness is the cluster info available. The second thing that you can see or can have to accommodate when you write this function is that if some of the data, let's say the content of this network attachment CR changes in the package, right? It could be that you get a new revision and it changes. So what you have to do is you have to compare the spec with what you generated, and then depending on that, change the condition. So there is also some elements that you have to take into account when you write this function, that you have to deal with changes as well. So it's not only the robustness, but also the changes, so that you basically take into account some of these validations you need to do in order to make that robust and idempotent and what have you. Okay, that's what that's my thought right now. So I'm happy to get or to have different views, but I think it's good to basically get a bit of a discussion on what needs to be done and how they look like, right? So now, and okay, I built this up sequentially because that's the happy part is what I'm showing into the slides. Right? So there can be very different things that how they get executed. So I'm trying to build up the slides in the happy part approach, if you will. But in reality, there can be the execution pipeline or how they get executed could differ a little bit, right? Yeah, Fish.
Yeah, so again, this is again for discussion in the sense, or for better understanding, will you actually have the kept file with the resources with the corresponding KRM resources defined? Do you have something like that already defined? The kept file with the KRM resources that is part of this?
So that was my next. So what I'm preparing as we speak, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'll discuss with John. So I prepared a CR, so a PR to actually create the CRs.
Mm-hmm. CRDs, you mean?
Yeah, the CRDs, sorry. Yeah, the CRDs. And I was then next going to try to make a true example of this, because which is useful for us anyhow to test, right? So an example of how this looks like based on the CRDs and the CRs that we would use. So if we start writing these functions, we can use that as a baseline to test things with. So in other words, the idea is to create a package that contains this, actually the starting point. So this
Mhm.
and that you actually see a real case.
Mhm. The reason I ask that question is like, for people who are now comfortable understanding what kept file is, right, in general, when they look at that, they get an understanding. Okay, this is the kept file, and these are the mutators and validators, and these are the KRM resources that is going to be part of the package.
Yeah.
And you get a better visual.
Yeah.
Yeah, seems like it's in plans. Okay, good.
Yeah, so correct. So I first wanted to go through this, right?
Okay.
Just to this is still theoretically, but I 100% agree with you. We need to get to the meat or the nitty-gritty details and look at all the things. So
Yeah.
my goal is to first get the CRDs in play,
Okay.
right? And then second is to start having this. Yeah.
Yeah, because I see this as equivalent as a KRM resource, which means you can have it there, but you have done nothing with it. Basically, you're not implemented it. For
Yeah.
example, even if you're trying to actually go off and introduce some new mutators or generators, at least I see it in the kept file and I'm like, okay, this is what I think Wim is trying to propose, sort of,
Correct. And what we could do, I don't know how you guys feel. So that was one of the things that I was trying to do is, I mean, we could jointly develop the first function somehow in one of these sessions if you want.
The function can be defined, right? In the sense, like, when you're actually saying this, if I were to map this, if I were to use this as an example and trying to come up with a kept file, I can already see that seems like you will actually have some 3 mutators or generators, like the network attachment.
Yeah, correct. So these are the 3 that I'm proposing that will be there, and I'm trying to explain in the next slides on how or what they should do and how they work.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry, Akash. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. So there is, I have 2 questions here. So I understand the robustness aspect of the kept functions. But one thing I have in my understanding is that we know that whichever way we are going to deploy it, we have not thought about it, but whenever we are going to deploy a cluster, we are going to have all these controllers like IPAM controllers.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So basically,
So now my question is,
yeah.
We kind of assume.
You're breaking up, I think, Akash. I think you're breaking up, Akash.
Yeah, it's completely
Controller.
not audible at this point of time. Yeah.
Am I clear? Yeah.
No,
sorry.
you're breaking up quite a bit. We didn't hear anything the last 1 or 2 1 minute, I think. You're gone again.
Yeah, I think he had a message saying he has got network issues earlier.
Okay. Okay, maybe Bala, you start, and then we can get back to Cash when he's back.
Yeah. Sorry. Can you guys hear me now? Sorry.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yes.
I'm really sorry about that. So basically, the question I'm asking is that we are assuming that the kept file, which says that IPAM function is going to be present, and we know that it is going to be robust. We know that it is going to be robust. That if it is present or not, it is going to understand that if this IP if the file is present or not, it has to be still working. It has to be idempotent. But we're kind of assuming that for it to work, that the controller has to be present. So nowhere we are actually, so are we there is a dependency which these functions have on the controller on the Nefio cluster. Whichever way we are going to deploy it, are we enforcing the cluster to have all these controllers now? That's my question.
So see, these functions, see, the way we are building it, I think John calls this the choreography, right? I start to call this the condition dance. Okay. So what I like about the approach personally is they are completely independent things and they do their thing, right? But if you put the right pieces together, as you said, this thing will work, right? Of course, that means that the guy deploys Nefio, right? As part of the Nefio deployment that you will see, or that we do also in the workshop, we install all the necessary controllers to make Nefio work, right? So as we are saying, these are the 3 functions that you have to add into the pipeline. Of course, the operator, and by the way, so this IPAM controller and the VLAN controller, they only have to be deployed in the management cluster, right? So all of this is only in the management cluster. None of this has to be consumed in the workload cluster. So we only have to ensure that those controllers will be there. And that's part of our installation. When you install Nefio, you will get that. That's the approach that we have been taking so far.
Yeah, sorry, I'm kind of jumping the line, but just to emphasize the point, yes. One is, yes, you're going to rely on that. There's certain subcomponents within Nefio that are running, and the package is intended to be delivered by Nefio, so we need to be able to rely on that. But what we can do is say, hey, in my environment, my IPAM is handled on the workload cluster. So we don't have a solution for that in R1, but there's no reason why these same resources couldn't be left in the package and delivered to the workload cluster and allocated at the workload cluster, or some other mechanism. Like right now, where so the package author doesn't have to know whether the IPAM allocations are done in the management phase, or shifted left or shifted right.
Yep.
But the people built the operator of Nefio, whoever's running that instance of Nefio, would set up their Nefio system to resolve those conditions, either in the management cluster or in the workload cluster. We haven't defined the exact mechanism, but like there could be a way to resolve the condition by generating, tagging the resource, removing the local config. I don't know. There could be a way to do it. We just haven't solved the problem yet.
Yeah, and for R1, basically, you should assume that these things get installed during installation. By the way, if you would basically build a flavor of Nefio with your own distributions, right? What we, of course, would like to see, and that's why these CRDs are important, is that you have those same CRDs. But let's say you have your own IPAM controller if you want, right? So you could basically say, I have a Nefio distribution with my IPAM. So you basically swap it out to yours. Or the way the IPAM is working, there's also a plugin system. So you could basically say, I want my backend to be X, right? So that you can also do. But so that's the type of customizations that you could envision, right? So, but in R1, as part of the installation of Nefio, we ensure that all the right controllers are installed at the right place. That's the assumption for R1. Going forward, we can have way more flexibility.
Thank you. Yeah.
Bala?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, mine was somewhat related to this discussion. And just to add to one more point on this one, ideally I can envision if somebody, if NF vendor is a package author, and then they have, say, some other requirements or some other conditions or injection point.
Yeah.
They could be writing the package, and they could also be supplying the controller for that as a part of the
100%. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and they could have their own CRDs that are added here, and they have their own controllers that are added here. 100%. Yeah.
Yeah, that is one thing. And my next question was also kind of what Jan was referring to. So this network attachment definitions and stuff, with all these complex hardware requirements, for example, all these DPUs and other accelerators where the offloading takes place, some of this networking attachment may have to happen in the workload cluster. In practice, I mean. So I was thinking probably, I think John has alluded to while answering the Akash's question as well. So it could happen in the workload cluster in a real life scenario if the need be.
Yes, and so as we said, is in R1 we are mainly focused on shift left, right? In the next releases we make it more flexible. So as John was saying, you could envision that some of these things will be in workload cluster, some on management cluster and stuff like that. So we are not, so none of that is excluded. Just for R1 we are just focusing on the management cluster for now.
Yeah.
But
Thank you.
I do want to emphasize that the package author shouldn't care.
Yeah.
The package author says, I need this attachment, I need this interface, I need this VLAN, I need this whatever, and their job's done. It's the infrastructure provider and the deployer and whoever's setting up Nefio that's going to decide, oh, IPAM happens for me by talking to a global IPAM system that allocates the IP, or maybe even only in certain cases it does, right? Based upon some labels or some conditions, it decides this particular IP is going to be resolved locally in the workload cluster. But the package author shouldn't have to know that, right? Because that's all about the particular environment in which the function is being deployed, not about how the function operates.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah.
Yeah. Ganesh.
Oh, hi, Wim. Not just, I don't really have a question, but previously when we went through one of your sample function, it was really useful, and you were actually suggesting that we take one of this element on the pipeline and do the function development in the meeting. So I wanted you to request you to continue on that. I'll be up for it. I'll be interested in similar lines. So if you have any ideas on that, like how we can do it as part of the meeting.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so because see, I think we somehow we have this baselining and education step and trying to get everybody on the same page. So I think I'm trying to get slowly to more execution space, and then there's multiple ways to do it. Either people have it 100% and then we can say, okay, you do this, you do that and that. But we could also take the approach to say, okay, let's take a real example and let's do it together and let's go through the nitty-gritty details jointly. And I think it's a good approach for everybody to learn. And I'm happy to do so. Yeah. So
I think that's a great idea. I think also it would be useful for functions in particular. Like we talked about, there's multiple ways of functions of doing it, but I think we should be able to create a repo that people can just clone as a starting point and then just fill in, you know, a method of a Go function or two, and you know, all the Docker file and make files and everything are there, because like it's kind of a pain to set all that up.
Yeah, so once you are used to, once you understand it, it's easy, but get there, it's the problem always. But so that maybe we should, if people say that's okay, then yeah, I'm happy to go through the motions and step by step to actually get you guys on board. Yeah.
See, moreover, like when we do one item in the pipeline, the other two people can distribute among ourselves, and we can take up. So it's easy for us to follow through. Like, it's just my suggestion. I'll be up for it.
Yeah, I see. That's why it's very good feedback. I don't know how you guys. I don't know most of you in person, so that's part of the community. If we believe that that's the way forward, then let's do it, right? Then that's point taken. And what I want to do, by the way, is I want to get the CRDs somehow into the system, because it will help us to make the code, right? So we can refer to the library somehow. So I actually have prepared the CR. Yeah, it's a discussion that we need to have with John. I can show you what I'm preparing if you want. But so I extended the Nephew API, and I don't know, maybe it's, so I think we have several CRDs, John. So what I was proposing is to have a subfolder of network requirements. So everything that is requirement for network functions, that we group them under V1 alpha, and I added capacity, DNN, and I changed network attachment to interface so far. But so these are the 3 CRDs that we typically use and consume. And then we have, for example, deployment type of thing is not really a requirement, but I would put in another subfolder, because but it's a proposal. I started to prepare it. It probably needs a bit more discussion. So probably for this meeting. Yeah.
Yeah, but I would probably just push that as a PR or something.
Yeah, that's what I'm preparing that. So that's what I'm preparing.
Okay, I'm less concerned about like the folder structure and stuff than I am about, like, you know, the group names and things like that. Like, I want to make, I don't know what the right thing to do is, but like at some point, you know, it's namespacing. So we have to figure out what the right namespace is.
Correct. Yeah. That's why we have to start that motion somehow a little bit, because otherwise it's difficult to. Okay. Yeah. Sagar.
Yeah. I don't know. I think if you're going to cover this question in the next slides, it's mostly related to, you know, when you were showing the example individual package that needs to be specialized. Yeah, this one. So this is, let's say, specific to UPF, right?
Yes, but I use the UPF example. My goal is this function shouldn't care whether it's UPF and SMF or AMF or SD1. It should always do the same thing.
Okay, that I got it. So, but I just wanted to ask that why at the level of making a package, we care about mentioning DNN and capacity. These things are really specific to UPF, right? So
wait, so capacity is also relevant potentially to SMF because capacity contains both the data plane as well as the control plane. So it has four attributes into the spec. It's uplink and downlink. It's maximum subscribers and maximum sessions. So it has both. So capacity is a generic capacity requirement that can be used for both data plane, but also control plane.
But I think that more to the point, a package is a specific, like it's just a collection of resources. It's the specific function. It is a package for the UPF of a particular vendor, maybe even on a particular platform.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but these kind of things can be managed by, it depends on the vendor, right? How they want to manage these things, because ultimately it's the software which is handling it. So they just want to do it using some configuration files or whatever. So probably these things does not really have to be there in the package.
So this is the vendor's package. So the vendor is going to decide what they put in the package. But if we create a CRD for something that we want to manage across, like essentially what we're doing is these CRDs, these that we're talking about, are the API that we're asking vendor packages to comply to. So we're saying, hey, if you're a vendor package and you want Nefio to be able to configure the capacity of your UPF, then you should support this capacity CRD. You should have it in your package. Then Nefio knows how to manage the capacity of that. Now you can write a function that interprets that capacity in any way you want. It can take that capacity and it can set values in your configuration files. You have some custom format configuration file. It can rewrite that file. It can do it in a function. You can do it in a controller. You can wait to do it on the operator down in the on the cluster. I don't care. But from a Nefio management perspective, we now know how to dictate, how to tell you the capacity we need. So this comes into play much later than R1 when we build a controller that says, I understand the relationship between the SMF and the UPF, and I understand that you want to scale the total capacity of your entire network by double. And now I know what things to go in and change because I have some ability to say, oh, you need, and then these capacities should be in terms of the consumer. So maybe it's sessions per second for, or I don't know what those are, but like it's
I got the gist of what you explained. So that's pretty much fine. So at the end of the day, these things not going to be, that's an additional feature, right? It's not going to be imposing that. If it's not there in the package and if it's somewhere else, it depends on the vendor, right? How he wants to manage these things.
The vendor may not be able to take full, the user of Nefio who uses that vendor's package may not be able to take full advantage of all the functionality Nefio offers because that vendor doesn't support that API. But yes, it's nothing mandatory. Yeah.
But for example, so again, why is DNN here, right?
Yeah.
You need an IP pool. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's not here really for DNN, but it's here really to actually say, I need an IP pool of this size, and the IPAM will take care that it gets allocated. So, because one of the things that we are trying to do also with Nefio, what you see today is you as a vendor, and we being one of them, basically do Helm and everything is in there, right? But these IPs and stuff like that, they are typically coming from a different group, and someone needs to give that, right? So that's part of what we are trying to do as well, is whereas today a vendor basically dictates everything, they should only care what the function is requiring. And we are trying to give them an ability to express their requirements that someone else is going to fulfill in order for them to deploy. That's what these requirements CRs are actually doing. Is that decoupling between infra and network function. That's what we are trying to address with this.
Okay.
I think the
okay.
question is, Wim, and the question is, I think, more specifically about what makes this particular package a UPF or the SMF, right? Because some of the definitions might be specific to those
100%.
specific network functions. Yeah. So
Yes.
in this, is that the information, whether it's UPF, SMF, part of the package variant set? Where is that information?
Okay, I made an abstraction of that. I think we have to discuss. It can be somewhere in the name of a cap file, or it can be a label or something. We can put that anywhere we want.
I mean, my thinking there, I think that's up for debate. Like, I think that we might want a resource that identifies, I said it in one of the documents a while back, the idea of that advertises, hey, this package, if you deploy this package, you're going to get UPF functionality.
Yeah, sure.
Right. But we can take it a step further because it enables us, this is like, again, getting to like the higher level, how the higher level orchestrators would make use of Nafio. But that package advertisement can say, well, in this version of the package, I'm a UPF and I'm a Nokia UPF, and I can scale from this lower bound to this upper bound, and I have these requirements, they're all in here. But then you can have another package that says, I'm a Nokia UPF, I provide UPF functionality, I can scale in this other range, right? And internally the package is completely different. It it's a totally different architecture for that UPF. So this is something I think we should think about. I don't think we have an answer for that yet, but I think it's probably useful longer term.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, good discussions. Yeah, please, if things are unclear or things like that, that's what we are all to do. So yeah, so this so when going back to the slides a little bit, is that if that network attachment generator happens, so basically what you will see normally is that a bunch of conditions. Wait, am I on the right slide? Okay, yeah, I did not. Yeah, I had to color these. I was trying to color everything that changed, but I did. Yeah, it was this morning, so I didn't do a good job. I'll update that. But basically, what you will see is that all of these things are new things that are being added to the system, and then also here there are some changes that are happening. The next thing is basically the IP allocator and the VLAN allocator. So these are actually controllers, and they are looking at the IP conditions, and they allocate an IP backend. And what they do is when the allocation is successful, they update the status of the CR. So they write the IPs and potentially the gateways inside of the CR, and they update the condition. If not successful, they also update the CR status and update conditions so that people get a feeling of why things don't work. Right. VLAN allocator is pretty much the same. That's the IP allocator, so it's very common. I know they're very much the same. They just have different attributes, but the whole principle is the same, right? And then, so at this stage, the package looks like this, right? So where in the meantime, our IPs are resolved because this is the happy part, and the VLANs are resolved, right? The next function is the NED generator. So this is the one that generates the NED CR. It uses VLAN allocation, IP allocation, and the cluster CR. So these are the three CRs that are being consumed. Of course, what you have to do is you have to align that IP with the right VLAN, right? So this VLAN and this IP, there will be the name that they use will both refer to the same interface name. And then what you do is you actually generate the NEDs based on that information. So it's actually, I think, rather simple. In terms of robustness, again, if there is no cluster info, don't do anything. Although I think this is probably less, this is just a leftover, I think. What you have to do is, for example, if the IP and VLANs are not aligned yet, so we have to keep the condition false. And they can also run when there is no IP allocation. And so there is some robustness that you have to build in order to make this work. But again, this thing should be anything that needs an NAD, whether it's a UPF or an SMF or EMF or something completely different, this function should be such that we don't care what we are doing this for. Okay. So with that, then the next stage happens. So we see now an NAD and for both of these interfaces. So important to also notice that there is no NAD for this DNN because it's a pool, so you don't need to allocate it. So there is also, so it's not for every IP allocation and not for every, so that you will need to generate an NAD. So there is also some logic that you need to build in there. And in the meantime, that condition of the NADs are then also getting to true. And then there is a last function, which is the NF deploy. And here, okay, this will be specific for SMF and UPF and so on. But here I wanted to use the configuration, the config map, or that. So when we discuss the cap function, there is a config. You could parameterize it with a specific config. So what it means is that we would put the SMF config map or the UPF config map or AMF config map into it or something like that. Or we use what John was saying, there is a specific resource that basically tells us it's a UPF or SMF or whatever. And then what this thing does is it's only when all the other conditions are true that you can basically do this, right? So here we take all, yeah. Okay, I think I somehow, this is definitely not complete. I think it took a shortcut, but yeah, so basically you take all the IP addresses, all the VLANs, all the cluster info, the DNN, the pools, and this generates the respective UPF deployment in this case for this particular package. And then once that is done, all conditions are put to true. And then, the idea is then to, at the moment, we have to manually approve. There are thoughts to build, to make like a rollout thingy that takes this and then rolls it out. But so that's basically, I think somehow trying to summarize what we have to do somehow. Yeah, Bala?
Yeah. Thanks, Wim. First of all, thanks for doing this. I know it's very detailed and we may still have questions, but this is really helpful in understanding the choreography of different components. So I wanted to state my understanding and just to make sure that it's the right one and it's also may benefit others too. So the distinction between using a function and a controller. So we use the controller wherever we need the data from external entities. For example, that's what we're using for VLAN and IPs, things like that. And when all the data is contained within, when it can be hermetic, that's when we are making a choice of functions. Just wanted to make sure that's the right one. And
that's aligned. That's aligned with how we are looking at that. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah.
Now, okay, Vish,
So one other thing, way I think about functions is I have KRM resource. I want to manipulate the KRM resource. And that's when I use functions. It's also right. That is my understanding.
It's mutator validating, and we are actually doing a bit of generator. We are generators somehow.
Yeah, I put them as mutators too at this point of time because I go by what is published at this point of time, and I.
Okay.
I think that's accurate, and I think that as is obvious from the fact that the question is there's a sort of clear connection between, right? A controller just manipulates KRM2. The difference is the controller does it, you know,
On a running cluster.
Yeah, in a running cluster. And well, a typical controller, and this is where I want to come up with another word, and we use the word injector, but I think it's probably the wrong word because they do more than that. Maybe like configlet, I don't know, some word that's probably used in like
agent.
Maybe, but the point is, like, these controllers aren't manipulating resources directly. They're manipulating resources inside a package. The resources that it's manipulating, it's really the package revision resource or the package revision resource that it's messing with. So I want to make, if we can come up with another word for these so that we cause less confusion, I think that would be useful, because they're controllers. They're running as controllers, long-running processes in a Kubernetes cluster. They're listening for Kubernetes resources, and they're manipulating those resources in some way. But they're all controllers that run and manipulate effectively package revision resources, but they're also individually tailored towards manipulating specific, you know, IPAM or VLAN or whatever it might be. So it's sort of like, what's the word we use so that when we say controller, which is so generic, we know.
But actually, what they do, John, is you're 100% correct, right? So they act upon the package. So it's a package revision controller, but then they also act upon their condition. So it's,
yeah,
I think that's the other piece of it now. The question is, yeah, do you call it package revision controller condition thing? That's probably too much.
So long.
Way too much. But yeah, it's not, yeah, I do agree with you. It's not, although you write them actually in the same way, but you attach them to the package revision. That's the difference.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if anyone has a good suggestion for names,
yeah, you could. No matter which term you use, it's going to be overloaded, because I thought of agent, and then I thought of, you know, doping, like in not the doping like, you know, the way you dope chips, or, you know, something specific to that sort of thing. But no matter what you pick, it's going to already been used by somebody for something else.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I had one question on this. So we expect this these kept functions to be network or application agnostic, right? I mean, but we still want these allocations to be application aware, right? I mean, when you're allocating something for N3, or if it's for SMF, it's like N4, or something that you do on the south in the service SBA interfaces and so on. So how is that distinction made within the kept function? You make it agnostic, but still have to be somehow aware of the service?
So the way that we do that is that we have labels attached to things, right? That for that function don't have any meaning, because it's just a key and a value, right? And that can then be used to give you context on what the meaning is, but the function itself has no clue what those key and values are and what they mean.
Yeah, so it's going to be up to the person setting up their IPAM system to sort of define what the appropriate labels are. And then we do have to figure out, like, I guess there'll be a set of labels from the point of view of the vendor. So the vendor will say this sort of like a logical, a set of labels that identifies the logical meaning of this interface. And then somebody will have to glue that to the IPAM, however the IPAM setup. So you can imagine, for example, the IPAM setup might have associated with a subnet a site code or location, and a network name management. I don't know, data. I don't know what the names are, but in the simplest case, right, just a location and a function, a name of some sort for the network. And so then anybody who wants to attach to that network in that location can use those two labels, and the IPAM system can allocate the next IP in that and return it done. or probably they need a third label, which is who they are, so that if it's already been allocated once, it can return the same IP, right? So like this is but that's kind of a convention between how you set up your IPAM system and how, so that's really a deployment specific thing. What's not deployment specific is like that logical use of that interface from that vendor's point of view. So during this process, I don't know if it's during the creation of the organizational version of the blueprint, like we'll have to think that through. How does that process? Is it a function call that they just configure the function? I don't know. Is it a set labels call? I'm not sure exactly yet. And this is kind of a thing we need to exercise and see how what works for.
Examples will help us here, I think, right? So it's real reality will help us to get to the bottom of it. At the moment, it's built so flexible that you can do almost anything. But of course, that is also not good because it's very abstract in that case. So but yeah, at the moment, the way I was envisioning it for R1 is that the label, so there is a sub, so what, and this doesn't happen at the moment as part of the, let's say CR or the, let's say the runtime things, but we do it at day 0 when we install Nephew. When we install the cluster, if you look in the Ansible playbooks at the moment, there is actually, the IPAM has CRs, okay? Has CR for network instance, has CR for prefixes, so you can allocate subnets. So what happens in the Ansible playbooks is those things are created based on your YAML file that you set up, right? We create per cluster, we create a subnet under the hood. You don't see that, or for people who understand, they will see that. And that's all happening. Yeah, we are running out of time. So that's all happening in the Ansible playbook at the moment. In release 2, most likely, this will happen also during so Nephew will take care of it by themselves, right? Because at the end of the day, in my view, that whole Ansible playbook, when we have the whole thing sorted out, should no longer exist, or it's like it's completely gone.
Yeah. We need to go to the next meeting, but
Thank you.
Thank you.
Some more questions, but later. Yeah. Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Thanks.